Hello everyone, my name is Emily Dunbar and welcome to NYO Canada Online Workshops. Our YouTube live chat is now open and we'll be fielding questions throughout the presentation, so please feel free to post any questions, comments, and to of course chat amongst yourselves. It is my very great pleasure to introduce today's presenter. He is an NYO Canada alum, a dynamic keynote speaker and presenter, and the founder of Brain Fitness International. Please welcome Paul Hyman.
Welcome everyone to number 3, Music with the Brain in Mind. It's a pleasure to be here today and thank you for taking time to join me. Now, we're going to look at a number of different ways of looking at our brain. And again, one of the things right now is, what would you like to get out of today's session? Last week we were covering some preparation techniques that you could use prior to a performance or an audition or a recital. And one of the things I talked about was how you can wire your brain, prepare yourself to be in that performance zone in 10 seconds. 2 principles I've learned that have been very helpful in my life has been authenticity and transparency. So before we go any further, I'd like to share with you last week's webinar. And I've learned to show up early for performance. And last week we did a little bit of a tech run. Showed up last week at 1:30. Nothing was working. There was nothing on the screen. And Marjorie and Emily was so kind. They said, Paul, we're going to go live in 5 minutes. So I sent off the PowerPoint to them. They loaded it up. I had never done a presentation with someone else clicking my slideshow, but Emily was fantastic. But that's what it took, 5 minutes to go live. And then I had to just drop into that zone and go, welcome everyone, without anything else taking away from that first presentation. The other thing I said about showing up early, that really came from my personal experience, but also from my best friend, to show up even if you don't play the first half of a concert, particularly brass woodwind players. And I can tell you the reason why, and that is, this has happened to me. Sometimes, for some reason, the soloist doesn't show up for the first half. You know, you play the overture, the solo, and then you have intermission, the big orchestral piece. Sometimes we have gone straight into the orchestral piece in the first half for some reason or another. So that's just a little tip about show up and be early. So our agenda today, we're going to again look at the mind-body connection and breath, learning developmental hierarchy. One of the concepts is neurogenesis, the rebuilding of neural pathways, and then how you can fit this in with a stepping stone performing learning protocol. Now, again, I talked about how much research is coming out around the brain. I just find it absolutely fantastic. Some people ask me if I ever miss the music industry, and I'm just finding myself just constantly being fascinated by new information about the brain, and I find it really, really wonderful. Now, when we look at our self-management, you see the mind, the body, and the behavior. So I have this tube here that I'm going to show you with, okay? And to start off with the mind, when we're feeling stressed out, it gets rigid thoughts. When we have our body, it gets even tighter. When we have our behavior, it even gets tighter. And you can feel yourself like this. What we're doing to self-manage ourselves for auditions, solos, recitals, performances, is that we want to create these types of coping thoughts. So we go, then we want to have a grounded, relaxed body. And then in terms of behavior, we want to be able to have creative problem solving, solution focus, and then all of a sudden, we have our full potential working for us. Now, we were talking about the mind-body connection. I took you through this, the very first webinar, this Tai Chi breath stretch. This time, I'd like everybody to stand up, please. And taking a moment to stand, because I said sometimes if you're anxious, breathing may actually exacerbate the situation rather than calm you down. So just stand there. Have your feet about shoulder width apart. Get a sense of that feeling of support underneath you. Notice what gives you a better sense of the ground. Lock your knees, everyone, or gently soften your knees. What gives you a better experience of the ground underneath you? Locked knees or soft knees? Most people will talk about soft knees. In martial arts, you want to have that agility to move and respond very, very quickly. The paradox is that when you go into that fight-flight response, your knees lock up, your body locks up, and you're like a stick person ready to fall over. Now, we have 3 arches in the feet, so it's like a little triangle, and it supports us. So I want you to be aware of your big toe, little toe, and just shift your weight side to side ever so lightly, feeling that little rock and roll from side to side. That's the first arch. I like you to feel your big toe to heel, that inner arch. So rocking forward and back, feel that. And your third arch, I like you to feel your little toe to heel. And again, rocking back and forth. Now, you can do this anywhere. Sometimes we find ourselves lining up for things. So right now, what I'd like you to do is just start doing a very gentle hula hoop in one direction. Feel all that sensory information coming back to you from your feet as you do your hula hoop in one direction and then do your hula hoop in the other direction. Okay, so now what we're going to do is just as you find yourself standing there, just breathe in, arms just float up to shoulder height, arms out to the side, exhaling, breathing out. Palms up, breath in, big ball of positive energy showering over top of you. Next one, breathe out to the letter T. Fingertips up towards the ceiling. Gather in all that energy that you need breathing in. And then eventually exhaling, pushing down. And in the first webinar, there's a number of instructions on how to do it standing and seated. So just notice how that is. And you can have a seat again, please. So how I'm putting this program together is very unique. It's movement-based multisensory brain stimulation. You might find it hard to believe, but back in 2008, I created the very first brain stimulation program for older adults in retirement residences and long-term care homes. Believe it or not, there is no such program of its kind in Canada. And a huge corporation asked me if I could develop a program for them. And this is the model. So the first building block, and this is on page 4 of your handouts. So the first building block is primitive reflexes. Do I feel safe? If you don't feel safe, everything is going to sort of shut down on you. So primitive reflexes. Next thing you work with is your postural reflexes, a sense of your balance, your ability to stand under the influence of gravity. Then once you feel that safety there for you, the next one is to develop some of these motor patterns. So we're going to be looking at that today, that we're learning how to walk or to crawl. and there's different combinations of using our body, either the same side or the opposite side. And this is all, I'll show you how it develops our brain integration. Then we move up into our higher sensory function of the neocortex, sight, hearing, and touch. Then we come to language, so the ability to talk, express ourselves. And then finally, making a conception, making sense of the world, both abstract and concrete. So that really is the building blocks of how we develop our brains. And a friend of mine, there's a saying, first in and last out. So all these building blocks that build up the brain begin to reverse as we get older. So first in, last out. So this brain stimulation program I created was to make sure that all these building blocks were constantly being tuned up to slow down the possible brain degeneration as we got older. So one of the things that you're all very, very gifted to have is your ability to play music, and it's constantly rewiring itself, developing new neural connections. As I said, the brain, when we're playing music, actually taps into all different parts of the brain. We did talk last week about the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere, but truly our brain is getting wired throughout. Now, this gives you a sense of the wiring that we're talking about. It's very, very complex, and it's just absolutely amazing when we do talk about the wiring. So one of the things that's really new is neurogenesis. Neurogenesis is the ability for the brain to rewire itself. We did not know this 10 years ago, that the brain, we used to think you're built with your brain and that's it. But we now know that the brain is always developing. We can keep it tuned up. And most important is, how can we get to a place where if you fire those neurons, you wire those neurons and you develop new neural pathways for improved functional abilities, your moods, and basically everyday behaviors. So in this slide here, it's quite amazing that you can see these little tiny red dots of new cells being performed and created. This is absolutely incredible in terms of what we know now because of the higher level of medical technical screening material. Now, here's another picture of our hippocampus. And the hippocampus is tied into our memory system, our moods. And one of the things that I'm going to show you later on, and I was maybe next summer, is something that I do with racquetballs. Now, they had older adults learning how to do a 3-ball juggle, and it took a while. And then they asked them, do not do this for a month. Then they came back and they started doing the juggling again. And to the amazement of the researchers, the hippocampus actually increased in volume size. It actually got bigger, which was never, ever heard about before. It was always assumed that as we got older, the brain would sort of shrink down. So that's amazing. Now, here's something else. When you think about neurogenesis, the building of new neural pathways, and again, you can see this in the hippocampus. I was a guest speaker down in Houston a few years ago, and it was an international conference on accelerated learning. And one of the other speakers was a neuroscientist, and she showed a slide that was absolutely unbelievable that she had got from other researchers, that within 20 minutes, you would see the potential of new brain fibers being formed. Little tiny bumps within 20 minutes of doing a new activity. Absolutely fantastic, incredible, and extremely hopeful when you see what else this means to all of us. So again, working with stroke recovery clients, I mentioned first in and last out in the developmental hierarchy, movement-based multisensory brain stimulation. The brain is plastic. It's always able to change its wiring. And again, neurogenesis, fire it, wire it. Now, this individual, I was, as I said, mentioned down in San Francisco for a year and a half. I was working with him. He had a stroke, heart attack. He lost his vision. And he could not stand up and do the Meridian Connection that I taught you earlier in our series. I worked with him every week, and he would record into a tape recorder the exercises, go home and practice it. 8 months later, everyone, take a look at this. He could stand up, cross his legs, and just stood there stable as can be. And it was amazing. He said, Paul, watch this. And he crosses his leg over, does this curling of his arms, and he stood there for the longest time. And I'm saying, well, that's great. No, wait. And he just stayed there. He got to the point that he could get on a rebounder like this, even after a stroke and having visually impaired or almost no vision, he was able to do this. So again, on page 6 of your handouts, the brain really needs sometimes to develop new connections. So if you're doing something that's new and you want to wire it in, give yourself a few moments to allow that learning to lock in. So one of the best ways is what I have already shared with you. The Meridian Connection is just to cross one ankle over the other, hands out in front, thumbs are down, bring your hands together, roll yourself in, tongue on the roof of the mouth. Just hang out and breathe. And just allow whatever new learning has happened to make those connections. Now, this next picture is another one of my clients, and he's a physician. He's a gastrointestinal specialist. He's also the head of one of the hospitals of 2 that he works in. And he had the stroke on the right side of his head. He could not scope with the left hand, and his balance was very, very compromised. He was embarrassed walking with that compromised walk. So his wife found me on the internet. They hired me for 10 days. I went to their city, stayed in this hotel. I worked with him every day for 10 days, 5 hours a day. I do a lot of different things. What I want you to get from this is that this right now is a balance board. He's standing on balance pads. He has a ball in his left hand, which was affected by the stroke, and in his right hand. And watch this, everyone. This will challenge anyone. What do you think? That's pretty amazing. Yes, it was intensive work, but he was committed to his own personal recovery. I worked with him. And what was also interesting with him was he had a master's degree in evidence-based medical research. So he was a little skeptical of my program. And as you can kind of see, it's a little different. Yet he wanted to have a baseline. This is his pre-check before we started the 10 days. This was his post-check after 10 days. He has the mind of a researcher. So he wanted to know, was this really working, or was this more of a placebo effect, and did I have anything of value to offer? So what was, we worked really well together, but to have a master's degree in evidence-based medical research, he really proved it to himself that it worked. And as you can see, he went back to work probably about a month later. Now, I'd like everybody to stand up right now, please. Just up. And do you realize that just by standing up from sitting down, you actually increased oxygenation to the brain by 15% through an fMRI? So every once in a while when you're sitting there, just get up, take a break, know you got 15% more oxygen to the brain. And I'd like you to do this next one. So still stay standing. It's called Loop of Awareness. This is on page 7 of your handouts. You can start anywhere. You can start here at breathing or feeling or moving and expressing. So right now, I'd like you to just take a couple steps. Doesn't have to be far, but I want you to move only as fast as you are aware of every single breath. Just walk and breathe. Feel each step supporting you across the floor, or you might begin feeling your feet on the floor. You begin to walk, or you could express verbally, and then breathe. Or you may be just walking down the street one day and just decide to have this loop of awareness deepen within yourself. So you might notice already, how many of you notice that you're probably walking slower than you normally do just to become aware of your breath? So it really doesn't matter where you begin. It's just having that loop of awareness. So that's on page 7. Now, here you go, caffeine. Now, yes, caffeine is good. I have caffeine, and it is a little bit of a good pick-me-up. So sometimes when you need that little extra charge to the brain, it's good to have. However, I want you to be looking at these next couple slides. Back in 1954, 55, I had this book that I was looking at and reading, and it was all on psychedelics back in 1954, 55. And this was a military experiment, and what they were looking at was the use of psychedelics such as LSD as a form of interrogation to weaken a person's mental state. So the next slides I'm going to show you come out of this book from 1954-55. So they had a spider, and they had the spider weave a web. Okay, so there you go, a spider web. Then they gave the spider, let's say, an overdose of caffeine to see what the effects would be. And here is what the spider was able to spin. Okay, so this is before caffeine. This is after caffeine. And then I love this cartoon by Gary Larson of The Far Side. Whoa, that can't be right. So when we look at water, here's a little cartoon. 20% of the body is water, 80% is stress. Well, not quite. We'll be looking at that later. But when we look at water, it has some amazing properties. One of the quickest ways that you can tune yourself up is to take a break and have a sip of water. I don't know if you take water to your lessons or take water to your classes or take water on stage when you're performing, but it's a fantastic pick-me-up. And I've got a slide here, some biofeedback. And like I said, this is before water. And the blue marks, blue lines represent your beta state, your alert state, 12 to 25 cycles per second. The red is your alpha state, 7 to 12 cycles per second. Okay? This is right after water, everyone. Just after a sip of water. Look at that. You have a higher degree of beta, which is your alert, awake state. And at the same time, you have an increased level of alpha for the state of relaxation. This is the best way to learn. It's the ideal way to go into a performance. You're alert, you're awake, you're totally focused in on everything around you, and yet you're nice and relaxed. And the show goes on. Now, this slide, everyone, is on page 8 of your book. And I just wanted to show you some of the benefits of water because it's really, really important. But one of the things I want you to be looking at is this sodium-potassium pump. We also have chlorine, but these are our electrolytes. And we really, really need electrolytes to calm down the nerves. Usually it's been measured at 70 millivolts negative, 70 positive millivolts. Okay? So one of the things around this is the negative is inside the cell, the 70 is outside the cell. Now, with radical dehydration, you can drop down to minus or plus 30 millivolts and death will happen. So when people have major accidents, they're taken into a trauma unit, one of the very first things they start to do is to get a saline drip going just to balance out your electrolytes. It's so important. Now, here's also another thing around being on Mount Everest. How many of you have seen pictures of people, melting ice and snow? Well, some of the training I've done has been rebirthing, very intense breath work therapy. I was doing it in Colorado at 13,000 feet. And one of the ways to alleviate and protect yourself from high altitude sickness, because at 13,000 feet, it's pretty high, and you rarely notice it as you're walking, is to drink tons of water. That's what the medical profession suggests to prevent dehydration and to oxygenate the brain, because the water molecules will bond with red cell molecules and improve oxygenation. One of the things they found with climbers on Everest is when they talk about edema, frostbite, confusion, disorientation, there's all kinds of stories of people walking off the face of Mount Everest, not really knowing where they are. And they're actually finding it's not as much the lack of oxygen as it is the dehydration effect, being that high up and not having enough water liquid in our cells. And another little piece is people will carry a little stove. But I want you to remember this. Well, not if you're ever going to climb Everest, but the Navy SEALs have a saying: one is none, two is one. So climbers that are really prepared for that summit on Everest will carry two stoves with them. For some reason, they run out of gas. For some reason, the stove doesn't work. Well, they've got a backup stove to work with. Now, I'd like to show you this. I don't know if you've ever seen this book, Masaru Emoto from Japan. But what he was doing was freezing water molecules, freezing water, distilled water, or lake water, and then in a frozen laboratory with an electron microscope at 10,000 magnification power, he was looking at ice crystals. Now, that other slide that says we're 20% stress, 80% water, some people say we're 70, 75% water. So I want you to be thinking about this on yourself. He took the same water, froze it, played Mozart Symphony number 40 in G minor, and then sliced it, put it underneath the microscope, and this is the ice crystal that was formed. And I think with Mozart, very bubbly, very vibrant, upbeat. Now, he took the same water and played Bach. And knowing Bach and his fugues, contrapuntal music, it's, structured. And you can sort of see that in this ice crystal. So that's the same water, but playing Bach, Goldberg variations, that's the ice crystals formed. Then get this, everyone, heavy metal. Okay, that's what it does to water. Now, another thing that was very interesting was he also took pieces of paper, wrote it on the test tubes, and you can see thank you. And this is written in Japanese: you make me sick, love and appreciation. And then I like this one here: before prayer and then after prayer, how it changed the water molecule. So just something to think about, your emotions, your moods, how that might be affecting you, mind, body, and spirit. So here we have something. This is on page 9 of your handouts. I've got my little brain here. I actually have a couple brains. But look at all the areas that are affected by movement. We have the cerebellum, our brainstem. That's usually our fight-flight response. We have our limbic system, our midbrain, where we're processing emotions. That's where the hippocampus is. And then the neocortex is our higher sensory brain function. So what we're looking at is, look at a slice of brain nerve fiber from a newborn baby and from a 2-month-old baby. And when you think about a 2-month-old baby, they're just kind of hanging out, looking at the world, looking back and forth. They're moving a little bit. But look at how much those neural pathways are being reinforced and what we say myelinated with a fatty sheathing to improve that communication of that nerve fiber. So when we're looking at developing our brains as musicians, we have this really rich environment of so many things that are happening. So this is an impoverished neuron, and here is one that's enriched. Now remember, that neuroscientist I met in Houston, Texas said within 20 minutes of a new physical activity, you were able to rewire that brain. So you saw 2 of my clients that had strokes, maybe 15, 20 years ago, they said, well, that's all we can do for you. Now, as you saw, with the right program involving movement and sensory stimulation, these people were able to get back their life and move forward. One other story I'd like to share with you is an NYO alumni, and I was his very first trombone student. Anyways, he had a catastrophic stroke. He plays bass trombone, or used to. He's retired now in Vancouver. He had a catastrophic stroke, and it took 30 hours before he got medical attention. And the very first year, it was very, very slow recovery. There was improvement. It's just he was not able to go back to work. And if you know, as a trombone player, you have 7 positions. And even now, I could probably have the motor memory to know each one. He could only get to 5th position. Therefore, his career with the Vancouver Symphony was over. I found out about it. I said, if I could just get my hands on you for 2 weeks, you won't believe what we can do together. In the first week, I already had him extending his arm that had been frozen for a year out to 7th position. Even further advances a week later. I gave him a personalized program for July, August, September, October, November. And he went back to work with the Vancouver Symphony for the next 3 years. That's what I mean by neurogenesis. We can rebuild those neural pathways to bypass damage and regain functionality. So you see this little mouse here. That exercise actually doubles the production of brain cells. So again, when we're talking about left and right hemispheres last week, if I'm moving my right hand, you know that I'm stimulating my left hemisphere. And I know this is a mirror image. And if I'm moving my left hand, I'm stimulating more of my right hemisphere. And if I'm moving both hands together, you got it, I'm actually integrating both hemispheres together. You can get these at dollar stores, these little wire things. And if you just need to sit there and just twist it and bend it, by all means, go ahead and do it. It gives you a little focus. It's like a dollar brand fidget. Now, here's another cartoon. No walking in the halls. So now what we have is a realization in the education system that we have DP8, daily physical activity, to get the kids up and moving and not sitting all day long at their desks. Now, on page 10, I have another exercise to show you. Okay, so this is one way that we learn how to move, which is opposite arm to opposite leg. And then the other one is the same arm and same leg. And I have this little character here to show you. I do like toys. Now, here's what I want you to do. You can do this standing or seated. However, what you're going to do is you're going to do 10 times opposite arm to leg. You're going to do 8 same arm, same leg, 6 opposite arm, opposite leg, 4 same arm, same leg, and finally you want the integration of both sides, opposite arm to opposite leg. Okay, so if you'd like to stand up, everybody, I want you to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Switch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Switch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and switch, same side. 1, 2, 3, 4, and switch opposite. 1 and 2. Now, you might not be doing that as you're preparing to go out on stage or even in a rehearsal. However, we have a lot more nerve fibers going our hands and our feet. So if nobody needs to know what you're doing, everybody, I'd like you to raise up. I'm going to just do this for you. Is just pinch your index finger and thumb together, but you'd have your hand down on your lap, but just squeeze it together and raise up the opposite toes. Lift them up. When you switch over, you squeeze the other hand and raise up the opposite toes. Then, same hand and same toes on the same side. Same hand, same toes on the same side. So you're going same side, same time, and then opposite, opposite, opposite. So those are different combinations. As you saw, what the science is saying, that movement really supports the building of nerve fibers. Now, I've got a little saying here. You can learn more about a person in an hour of play than in a lifetime of conversations. You might have had that experience playing with somebody for the very first time. You saw things that you had never maybe seen before. However, play is very, very important. One does not cease to play because one grows old. One grows old because one ceases to play. George Bernard Shaw, that quote is on page 11. Now, here's another little thing that has come from my experience. I'd say to friends, well, I'm going to go out and play a concert. I'm going to go out and play a show. I'm going to play a recording session. Then they would say to me, Paul, that's all you do. You go out and you play. When do you ever work? True story. So then I go, well, I got to go to work now. I got to do this concert. So it's funny how when we say as musicians, I'm going to play a concert or something, people say, oh, you don't ever work. When do you ever work? You're always playing. So last week I showed you this slide that every thought has specific neural pathways. Okay? So every thought you have is lighting up a different series of connections. And what we really want to do is sometimes change some of those patterns. Now, I mentioned that I was a clinician for 10 years at the Center for Addiction and Mental Health. I was working with very, very serious life situations with people, very serious, and I was doing everything I possibly could to change it up for them. So one exercise that I found very helpful, this is on page 12 of your handouts. It's the ABCs, and underneath it, you write right or R for right hand, L for left hand, T with both hands. So you can sit there right now, everybody. We're just going to go through this right now. So there's the alphabet. Now, I want you to think about how complex a process this is in your brain. You have to see the letter, interpret the letter, verbally say the letter, and then raise up the appropriate right, left, or both hands together. And if you were thinking of something that was stressing you or disturbing to you, you'd be surprised at what that will do at the end of this exercise, going from all 26 letters of the alphabet. But right now, everybody ready? So A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I. That's easy, right? You can do that for the whole rest of the alphabet. Next one, when you see a space here, you do not move. You keep your arms by your side. Ready? So we're going to start again. Ready? A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I. Still pretty easy, right? Well, now you can do this seated, or it is fun to stand up. If you are going to stay seated, you're going to raise up the opposite heel off the ground as you raise up the appropriate arm. And when you hit the letter T, you're going to raise up both heels as you raise up both arms. But if you would like to do this standing, it's a little bit more fun. So as you raise up one arm, so A is left hand, you kick out your right leg. At letter E, you raise up both hands and you jump off the floor. Ready? A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I. I know it was a challenge. It's a lot of fun though, and you are really, really stimulating a lot in your brain. And then finally, the last one, what we're going to do is start at the beginning of the alphabet and work our way back. Okay, so here for this example, we're going to start at I, and at A, I want to hear a really good Canadian A. Ready? I, H, G, F, E, D, C, B. Ready? A. Okay, everyone. So that just gives you a little bit of sense of that going on. Okay. This other little thing here is called Wadley Archer. So just a little fun game to play with your integration. Just take one hand, place it on your nose. Take your other hand, reach over to your opposite ear. So one arm is in, one arm is out. And then you're just going to switch back and forth and like this. Or you can switch over here and here and here. Or you can switch across and cross and cross. So you can play with this. But there's a little song I like to sing called Wadley Archer. So get your hands out like this, everybody. So you can go up and over. So here is, I'm as well as I can sing. Wadley Archer, Wadley Archer, doodly doo, doodly doo. Wadley Archer, Wadley Archer, doodly doo, doodly doo. I like the rest, but the one I like best is doodly doo, doodly doo, doodly doo, buddy doo. Yeah. Okay. So another shot to show you a little bit about the nervous system. This is our central nervous system. So you see the nerve plexus center here on the chest. Look at this around the belly button. This is the first connection to life. Look at all the nerve fibers, and then we have other nerve fibers out of our eyes, okay? And to show you some of this fight-flight response, check out this little character. The eyes. Now, as I said, transparency and authenticity, two of my principles. I can tell you, I probably look like that looking at a brand new music composition going, you got to be kidding me. Anyways, the show had to get played and I did it. So this brain buttons is 2 acupuncture points. So everybody just place your hand on your chest here, just below your collarbone, either side of your sternum, thumb and index finger, hand on your belly button. Massage this, gently looking from one side to the other. And then switch hands. Tracking your eyes from left to right, blinking and breathing. maintaining your head as stable as possible. Okay? So when we're doing any of this, as I said, if you're not aware, you can't take care. So this 3-step process is just notice how you're currently functioning, do some brain fitness activities, and then notice how you're functioning afterwards. So right now, I'd like you all to think of something that might be causing a little stress for you, just a little bit. And without moving your head, only your eyes, I want you to look up to the ceiling as far up as they'll go. Notice if there's any strain there. Look down to the floor as far as they'll go. Any strain there. Look over to one side as far as you can. Any strain there at 9 or 3. And look to the other side as far as you can. And notice if there's any strain on your eyes. So if you did notice some strain on your eyes, that's good. We're going to diffuse and take some of the stress off of it. So on page 14 of your handouts, we have this exercise called PACE. We're going to start with water, these brain buttons, this movement pattern, and finish up with Meridian Connection. Okay? So if you've got water, that's wonderful. So the first one we're going to do is ask yourself, do you have energy to learn? If you answer, yeah, no, then you do this 4-step process anyway. So I'm going to join you guys. Cheers to the rest of your summer. Cheers to being chosen for NYO. So cheers to you, everyone. Okay. Place one hand on your chest, one hand on your belly button, below your collarbone. Massage these points, looking straight ahead, and blink your eyes, and track your eyes from left to right, blinking and breathing, blinking and breathing. And eventually come to a place where you can consciously slow down the eye tracking so that you can stop, blink and breathe, stop, blink and breathe. Then switch hands, everybody, and do the same thing again. Blinking and breathing. And I can tell you, when you first start doing this, your eyes will dart from left to right as sort of a reaction for stress, to be hyper vigilant. Where's the danger coming from? So slow it down, blink and breathe, and just notice. It's real quick. Okay, now we're going to do that movement piece. So again, same arm and same leg. So just same arm, same leg, up and down. And like I said, if you are maybe on stage, just use your fingers and just raising your toes. Now take the same arm, one arm and opposite leg, crossing that over. So again, visualizing, you've got both sides of your hemispheres being activated, or about 80% of our motor nerve pathways are connected to the opposite side of the brain as we move our body part. And then finally, the Meridian Connection that we've done a few times. So legs out in front, arms are straight down, thumbs are down, cross your arms, interlock your fingers, tuck yourself in, and breathing. You want to close your eyes. And then cross the other leg over, everyone. And notice how that feels. That's part one. Part two is to uncross your arms. Bring your fingertips together. You can rest them on your lap. I'm just doing it here for you to see. Just notice if you feel any pulsing in your fingertips. You know, you can do each one of these a little bit longer, but, you know, usually about 60 seconds each activity. And then we come back to the post check. Just notice how you're thinking and feeling right now without moving your head, only your eyes. Think of that situation before. Look up with your eyes and notice to 12 o'clock. Look down to the floor as far as you can, 6 o'clock, and notice. Look to one side as far as you can, 9 or 3, and to the other side as far as you can, 9 or 3. Notice if it took some of the strain off your eyes. This is an incredible process. And what I have here on page 15 and 16 of your handouts is a chart to check off. I usually suggest 3 times a day, those 4 steps. And to show you how this works, this is, again, working with some very intense situations in people's lives. So I had this activity for goal planning. So the center part was the goal. These were self-sabotage strategies that would stop that person from achieving that goal. This, everyone, is 5 minutes later, and look at the handwriting. And as you can tell, it's the same person. There's their signature. But look at what they've written here. Get into the solution for the problem instead of focusing on the problem. When I train therapists, I say, if you have something that works faster than this, teach it to me. Because I can tell you, you have no idea how much time would go into a therapy session to change a person over to that way of looking at an issue. So in closing, light up your full potential with whole brain integration. I trust you're all getting a little older and wiser about the benefits of music on the brain. And like I said, it's real simple. It's like this little Jacob's ladder. Just start with 1 or 2 exercises, and then just add another one, another one, another one. That's the end of webinar number 3. Thank you. I'm Paul. And thank you so much for another time out of your day.
Thank you so much, Paul, on behalf of NYO Canada and everybody watching. We really, really appreciated this seminar. If we could just take a quick moment before I let you go, we do have one question.
Okay.
That I'll pop up on the screen and read to you. What is the importance of the tongue being on the roof of the mouth for that exercise? I believe this is one of the first ones that you did right at the beginning.
Yes, it is. It was in the second. Okay, the tongue on the roof of the mouth, everyone, is that we have 14 main meridians, 12 out to the hands and feet. And in traditional Chinese medicine, the tongue on the roof of the mouth is to connect the central meridian that comes up the center part of the body, the governing meridian that comes up the spine and ends at our top lip. So when you have the tongue on the roof of the mouth, the theory is it circulates the qi energy. That's how the Chinese think about it. In Japanese, it's ki energy. In yogic tradition, it's prana or life force. So the tongue on the roof of the mouth. So there's a Taoist style of breathing meditation where you can have the tongue on the roof of your mouth and breathe in. And when you breathe out, lower the tongue off the mouth, tongue on the roof of the mouth. Breathe in, and then lower it and breathe out. Does that answer your question?
There's a little bit of a lag, so I'm not sure if Declan will be able to get back to him, but I think it was a pretty complete answer. So we'll just say thank you once more, Paul, on behalf of NYO Canada for this amazing talk. And thank you, everybody who tuned in live.
Thank you, everyone. See
Have
you
a great
next
rest
week.
of your weekend.
Goodbye.
Bye.